seems to me that white America must see that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. American society made the Negro's color a stigma, and that can never be overlooked.
Almost a century after slavery was abolished, freedom for black Americans was still a hollow promise. In the North, blacks endured economic inequality, slums, and poverty. In the South, laws enforced racial segregation in almost every aspect of life. Blacks had to go to separate schools, drink at separate fountains, and eat at separate lunch counters. Crossing the color line was a risk that few dared.
They want to throw white children and colored children into the melting pot of integration, out of which will come a conglomerated, mongrel class of people.
In the mid-1950s, after they had risked their lives in World War II, an oppressed people had had enough. In Montgomery, Alabama, the daily humiliations included being forced to ride in the back of the bus. And if you were black and a white person wanted your seat, you had to give it up.
The city as a whole, they were livid because the bus drivers were so horrible to the people. They called them all sorts of names, and the community was absolutely positively worn out.
In September of 1955, a weary Rosa Parks, a seamstress active in the NAACP, decided she'd rather go to jail than give up her seat on the bus. The community rallied behind her, staging a boycott of the city buses.
And I've always said,
on Wednesday when you come in, let's turn the computer on.
It was spontaneous. It was like spontaneous.
And then if it doesn't work, we'll get somebody to come help or something.
The grassroots movement needed a spokesman. They turned to the new pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, Martin Luther King Jr. He was just 26.
He got pulled into the Montgomery bus boycott really because he was the new kid on the block.
It was E.D. Nixon who called Martin and said, Reverend, this movement started by Rosa Parks requires leadership that's college. Then we need you, sir.
He has said he was reluctant, but not for long.
Because as long as you sit in the back, you have a false
Monday.
and so long as you let the white man
Monday gets me down. What? No.
This cause because of his own religious belief, his own depth of religious thought.
This is a non-violent protest. We are depending on moral and spiritual forces.
He made a central judgment as a very young man that what Gandhi had done in India was the only way to press for social progress and social justice in an America deeply rooted in the rule of law.
Gandhi liberated India from British colonial rule by leading a movement of nonviolent resistance. King adopted his methods, and soon his boycott stretched from weeks to months. The bus company and downtown businesses started losing money. The white community grew increasingly agitated. King was arrested twice, threatened. And then on January 30th, his house was bombed. His wife Coretta and 9-week-old daughter were inside.
When he rushed home, not knowing whether or not I had been injured or the baby had been injured, so my father said to me, well, Coretta, I came to get you and the baby. And then I said to him, well, Dad, I can't go. I want to stay here with Martin because I feel this is where I should be. But
he said, now we just have to keep praying for strength. The strength to keep going in spite of what they're trying to do to stop us. That was his preachment all the time. We can't stop.
Despite the dangers he faced, King held fast to the boycott and his nonviolent philosophy, a revolutionary strategy that stunned even his followers.
It was the place of murder, it was the place of mayhem. You're going to be nonviolent in the face of all of this mayhem. That'll be a miracle I would love to witness. And I witnessed it.
King's tactics paid off more than a year after the boycott began. The Supreme Court outlawed segregation of public buses. The boycott was over, and a new movement had begun.
And the Negro citizens of Montgomery are urged to return to the buses tomorrow morning on a non-segregated basis.
That was a great day. I remember him saying that tomorrow morning we will be on the bus. That was a great day.
The victory thrust King onto the national stage. He was on the cover of Time magazine, one of the first black men in American history. Sparks from the victory in Montgomery now ignited hope across black America.
People started calling him from all over the country saying, come and help us. We have the same situation here.
King may have been an accidental leader, but he was in many ways born for the role. His journey began on January 15, 1929 on Auburn Avenue, Sweet Auburn, the heart of a thriving black middle-class Atlanta neighborhood where his father was pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church.
Did he seem in your crowd to have some special quality at a young age, or did that come later?
You knew, as the old folk would say, that boy's going someplace. He's going somewhere. He's going to be something.
In an era when most Southern black men got less than a 6th grade education, King went to Morehouse College.
And he entered Morehouse College at age 15. He was all interested in books, and we would go to parties, and he'd still be reading or looking at the Bible or something, and I'm saying, Emil, you're not going?
By his senior year, King was an ordained minister. After graduating, he went north to seminary school.
He started reading and studying Gandhi, and that was what led him eventually into the practice of nonviolence.
In early 1952, King met Coretta Scott, a striking 25-year-old music student. They married a year and a half later.
Did your mother talk about how she met your father?
She did. She would share that when she first met him, her first response was, wow, this is a sort of short man. She was not impressed initially. But once he began to talk and they began to dialogue, and then of course she saw him in the context of his ministry, he became a giant. You no longer were able to physically see his appearance.
King moved with his new wife to Montgomery to be a pastor, a decision that catapulted him into a role that he seemed to be destined to play. With that new role came the threat of danger, something he would live with throughout his life. In September of 1958, while in Harlem promoting his first book about the Montgomery bus boycott, there was an attempt on his life that almost killed him.
He'd gone up to Harlem for a book signing, and while there, a demented woman came up and stabbed him in the chest. And the doctors told us, as he often told people, that if he had sneezed, he would have been dead. But that had an effect upon him.
Do you think that made him what he was, those experiences?
They did. It made him all the more determined. When they took the knife out of his chest, a letter opener, it left a cross-shaped scar. And he used to say, you guys don't know what it's like, but every morning I wake up and brush my teeth, and I have to realize that this day could be my last. And it put an intensity into everything he did.
He came in the name of love. King, brought to you by
being tortured.
After the Montgomery bus boycott, Martin Luther King helped found the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to further the cause of civil rights. But increasingly, Dr. King found it hard to balance his job as a pastor with his civil rights work. So when his father asked him to come co-pastor his Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Dr. King seized the opportunity to return home and devote more time to the movement.
I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds the future.
In 1960, the future was at hand. In February, black college students in Nashville and other southern cities launched a full frontal assault on legal segregation by staging sit-ins at whites-only lunch counters.
I'm sorry, our management does not allow us to serve niggers in here.
In spite of all of this, I had to keep loving the people who denied me service.
Local whites reacted with violence, taunting and assaulting the protesters while they waited passively for service. When police did intervene, it was usually to arrest the protesters and throw them in jail.
I think the sit-ins served to dramatize the indignities and the injustices which Negro people are facing all over the nation.
Without seeking the role, King was becoming the movement's moral leader.
He was just sort of the spiritual leader of everything.
Gene Roberts was a young journalist the night Martin Luther King came to North Carolina to raise money for the cause.
All over the audience, you could see women who were clearly washerwomen and laundresses reaching into their pocketbooks, pulling out their handkerchiefs with knots in them, unknotting the handkerchiefs to contribute to the civil rights movement. And I walked out of that church convinced for the first time there was going to be massive change in the South because the sentiment ran so deep.
In the spring of 1961, idealistic whites and blacks drawn to the movement from all over the country decided to challenge segregation laws by riding through the Deep South together. The young volunteers came to be known as Freedom Riders. They were met with mob violence in Alabama. The violent reaction to integration in the Deep South made headlines from coast to coast. Besieged, battered, and stranded in Montgomery, the Freedom Riders needed a spokesman of national stature. Dr. King answered that call.
We will not specify the exact time that the ride will resume, but it will continue.
Aware of King's growing national influence, the white establishment greeted him with threats.
The best thing for King to do is to get out of Alabama as quickly as he can because he's a menace to the peace of this city.
When word spread that King was holding a rally in support of the Freedom Riders inside the church of his close friend Ralph Abernathy, a vicious mob gathered outside, their hostility escalating by the hour.
The church was threatened to be bombed or burned with several hundred people in it, and Dr. King came and spoke.
Now, we've had an ugly mob outside. They have injured some of the federal marshals. They burned some automobiles.
And everyone realized that the church was surrounded. All of us knew that it could be penetrated and people could get killed or injured.
Running out of options, King called Robert Kennedy at the Justice Department to plead for federal protection. Within hours, help was on the way.
I want to make this announcement that the city is now under martial law.
Martin Luther King Jr. Didn't appear to be scared or frightened. He wanted to assure the people that everything was going to be all right.
We are not giving in for what we are standing for, and maybe it takes something like this for the federal government to see that Alabama is not going to place any limit upon itself. It must be imposed from without. And I hope that we will remain calm as we have done in so many touchy, difficult moments, and I know we're going to do it. God bless.
It was in those early crucibles of crises, such as the Freedom Rides, that King's distinctive style of quiet leadership took shape.
He didn't function as a leader with us. he was just, one of the team, but Martin could sit in a meeting and listen to our debating and arguing about something and listen very quietly. And we knew he was listening.
He didn't have to be in charge of everything. It was his thinking that made the difference. It was his presence that made the difference.
When he spoke, there came a hush in the room because we wanted to hear what he had to say when he spoke.
We always had meetings in my home in New York because it was in that environment that he met what we call the New York delegation.
The New York delegation, made up of celebrities such as Leonard Bernstein, Sammy Davis Jr., and writer James Baldwin, was of enormous value to King. It raised money for the movement and raised its visibility.
It was my task to make sure that I had a strong celebrity corps, that I had a lot of artists to bring validation to the table.
We are indebted to my dear and abiding friend, Harry Belafonte.
And Dr. King understood the great value of that.
King also found allies in New York's white business community, such as Harry Wachtell, who became a lifelong legal and financial advisor.
The first time they met and my dad was dropping Martin at Idlewild Airport, he said, look, at the very least, let me write you a check. What's the name of your 501c3? And Martin said, what's a 501c3? And my dad said, boy, I really can't help you.
As important as the high-profile help and money was, Martin Luther King continued to be the movement's most valuable asset.
I think the vast majority of Negroes in this country know that they want to be people, they want to be men. They want equality, period. It just boils down to that.
Black churches were the backbone for the civil rights movement, but Dr. King went in search of recruits who were not always found in church pews on Sundays.
He could shoot pool pretty well. He would walk into pool hall in Southwest Georgia on Auburn Avenue and shoot pool. And he was using that as a mean of having to organize people, reaching people.
We want and solicit the support of everybody in this community, all of the Negro citizens and even white citizens who will join with us.
Get people to be aroused from their apathetic slumbers.
By the end of 1961, the new civil rights movement had gained critical mass, but it remained under attack from Southern whites. They vilified King, accused him of being a communist-inspired agitator. Death threats were not uncommon.
In Arkansas, where you lived at the time, he was a pretty controversial figure. Do you remember people talking about him?
Oh, God, yes. You know, of course, a lot of the white people who were racist, they hated him. But that was the inevitable short-term consequence of the fact that he was so good and so effective, and he was moving the nation.